Today we'll be talking about data warehousing and big data analytics on Azure. Apart from me today, we have Nishant as well as Oliver, my colleagues, who will be talking you through some of the key innovations and work that we are doing, as well as showing you a demo of how data warehousing and big data can come together to solve many of the problems that you may have. Let me give you a view of the agenda. So the first agenda that you see here really is talking about trends and challenges that we are seeing in the market, what we are hearing from customers, what we are hearing from people like you. Then we'll go into why Microsoft, where Oliver will be talking about the major innovations that we are bringing to the table. Then we'll also talk about customer stories, what are we hearing from some of the key customers, and then we'll close with a live demo. After that, we'll have time to do a Q&A and really answer any of the questions that you may have. So when we talk about trends and challenges, what are the key things that we are seeing out there in the market? And what's really coming out as some of the key areas where customers are feeling challenged or are thinking of making innovations? The first big area is related to the amount of data which is coming through. And that's captured in the first point here, which are big data and IoT. There's so much of data getting generated right from machines, humans, connected cars, and everywhere else, that there is a huge amount of data for organizations to manage and get insights from. And organizations understand that there is a lot that can be done from the data. The key is how do we manage and store and really use all this data. So that's really coming a lot because of data volume, which has been increasing. The second big trend is around cloud. There is a clear ambition for many companies to really start looking at the cloud and exploring how do we take advantage of what cloud has to offer, which is not just cost but multitude of other things. For example, getting a fully managed solution, being able to do much of solution building right in the cloud instead of waiting for on-premises solutions and hardwares to arrive. And the last one really is connected to what do we do with all this data? What can we do in terms of predictions, in terms of being more accurate, in terms of being more agile, in terms of creating more value for our consumers? And from that context, a lot of innovation has been happening, and Microsoft has been leading the pack from the context of really bringing including artificial intelligence, including cognitive, and really investing into where the future is headed. So let's go a bit deeper into a couple of these areas. The first one really we talked about the volume of data that is coming through. The key piece here to note is that yes, the volume of data is coming without doubt, but what you also see that the quality of data is really changing. So earlier you had most of the data coming from analog and then digital coming through, but now most of the data as we go into 2020, the huge piece of that data landscape is actually going to be connected data, which actually starts to bring in the fact that much of this data is actually born in the cloud, is actually born somewhere outside of your premises, and therefore it might be more effective and much faster for you to bring insights and take actions if you are able to go into the cloud and actually work on this particular data. So that's really a big piece apart from volume to keep in mind, where the data landscape and the type of data itself is changing. The other piece, and this is really related to a deep research that we went ahead and did, when we actually asked customers and companies in how are they using data, where are they in the data maturity curve, if we can say that. And there are two key numbers here to talk about. The first one, if you look at the below number of $100 million, what we realize is that companies which are more mature in the way that they use data, they end up making more money in their bottom line, top line. Of course, there are multiple other reasons why companies do better, absolutely. But if we are looking for data points, there certainly is something, which kind of substantiates what most of us think where data is really helping companies. The other number which you see here, which is 10%, is really organizations who are wanting to use data to start something profitable, something interesting. And this is really around coming up with new undiscovered innovations and really thinking about what data can do for you. So data is really becoming a competitive advantage for companies who are using it in the right way. And if you look around, you'll already see many, many new leaders, a new class of companies are coming through, which are actually using data to stay ahead of the curve, to really create new and faster value. And that's very obvious in the way the companies are doing it. And you have got enterprises which may be small, which may be large, but they're really doing very intelligent stuff with their data. So let's take a few examples here. The first one which you see here on the left hand side, whether it is from improving visibility to make more accurate predictions, and there are many examples that we already see in our customer base. For example, we see customers who are able to plan inventory and locate the inventory based on where they are expecting the machines to fail. So when you're planning inventory across the world, across thousands of locations, it might be very useful if you are able to predict which particular location might need which particular part of the inventory. And therefore, this really gives a lot of advantage to companies in terms of planning, but also in terms of cost management itself. The second one which you see here is around getting the right product to the right place. And this is a lot about making sure that when you are planning your supply chain, how can you really look forward and see based on the consumption, etc. of consumers, how do you get your products and your SKUs in the right locations? The third way where we are seeing a lot of smart things happening is really about personalization. And this we are seeing a lot in the consumer business, where there is a lot of requirement on part of companies to work with customers and their consumers to make sure that there is much more renewal happening. Because as we all know, it's much easier to keep a customer than to acquire a very new customer. The cost could be multiple times when you try to acquire the same customer. And therefore, with the aim of retention, there is a lot of ambition that companies have to personalize the products, be ahead of thinking in terms of making sure that consumers have the right choices when they think of upgrading their products. A lot of these things happening in the consumer business. Then we get into fixing problems proactively before they start, and there's a lot about predictive maintenance. And then the last example here is around exploring new business opportunities with data-driven services, which goes back to the earlier slide where we were talking about 10% of companies really thinking about how they can create new opportunities just on back of this data. And later on, Oliver will also talk you through some of the customer examples, deep dive. But here I've got 5 quick customer names who are doing exactly along these lines and driving this kind of change to drive better revenue and better bottom line for their business. The first one here is Merchants Fleet Management, significant saving because of better planning. Chrono Drive on better inventory processing, which actually led to reduction in inventory processing by 50%. That actually saves them a lot of time to really focus on their business, creating value. Tangerine, a bank based in Canada, and they have been able to reduce customer insights and bring them from 24 hours to seconds, and they respond fast to what their customers are looking for. They are really doing some great innovation in the space of social media and using some of these social media to bring it back into other data points and see how they can serve their consumers better. Johnson Controls and Rockwell Automation are the examples where they have really invested into using data in many, many intelligent forms and make sure that they are able to help grow their business from there. So that's really what companies are doing. But while doing all of this, when you look around yourself, you'll not see that this is the example which is there everywhere. So why are some companies able to do this while others are not able to do this? And that really takes us into the space of challenges, is that, well, we know that data is useful. We know that companies are making extra millions of dollars and growing their top line, bottom line, keeping their consumers happy because of data and how they use data. But why is it that not all companies are able to take advantage of this situation? And that takes us into one, of course, historically how data has been used. And that's the first problem, is that historically the planning for data was always done in terms of there would be relational kind of data which would be coming at a certain pace, and therefore the planning was done accordingly for storage or management of that data. But what we are observing now is that because the data characteristic is changing, and I talked about it in one of the slides where we started talking about connected data, so a lot of data is connected. But while being connected, the data characteristic is also changing in terms of going from relational to non-relational. Most of the data today getting created is actually unstructured data, data which is coming in form of images, in form of videos, in form of social media conversations. And this is something which historically we have not been able to plan for, and now companies are struggling where they need to bring all of these data types together like Tangerine did to really make sense of their data, drive insights and grow their business. So that's the first big challenge that we are seeing that the companies are facing. The second big challenge is really demands for performance and price. So when you get so much more data, like huge amount of increase in data volume, then there is also a cost component to it. And while there is cost component, the more data you have, and unless you increase your processing power by number of magnitude, you will end up having low performance, and that would risk your ability to go fast to the market. And that's what we are observing, is that while there's a lot of data coming, it's actually slowing companies down to taking more actions and being more agile. So this whole cost and performance piece is slowing down the agility, and companies need to think about, hey, how can we get high performance at a lower price, or how do we manage that situation? The third one really is around fragmented architectures, and this goes back to the point that as you get more and more data, you start putting it in certain stores. And then we're seeing this across companies, is that in big corporations, you don't have one place where you have all the data. You've got multiple data marts. You have got copies of the same data multiple times, increasing again the storage cost and cost and number of stores that you have, and also different type of data going into different stores. So you may have some data on premises like your ERP, etc. Some data which is generated in the cloud, like what people are replying on Twitter to you, Facebook, etc. So there are a variety of data which are all in different kind of places. And then you have got data like unstructured data which might be in Hadoop, and then you have got some data which has been in your earlier self-built apps which you have been using for many years. So there are all these kind of data sitting in all these various places. And the challenge is, how do you bring all that data together? Because effectively what companies are looking for is making sense of their full data estate, not just data from one store or another store, across rather. And that's the third challenge which we are seeing. And the last challenge really is supporting new audiences and new insights. And I'm sure many of you would have heard how the latest and coolest jobs are really into data science. And what we are observing is that many new kind of audiences, whether it is in the space of data science, whether it is in the space of developers, who are actually demanding more and more from the data which exists. And that's where there is a need for the data and for all the tools that you have to be able to support not just the historical audience who would go and do certain kind of analysis on the data or visualization and reporting, but also the ability for people to go and ask questions from the data which you have not asked before. The ability to go and process huge amount of data and try to find insights where people have not gone before. And that's really a very new space that's coming, and we feel that it actually strengthens the existing technical decision makers in companies. Because what is happening is that earlier we had got a big story around how to manage data around cost, but now the opportunity is shifting from not just managing data, but thinking about what can the data do for you, do for the whole organization, how can data empower everybody in the organization. And that's really this particular point, is that how does data then support people across the organization and not just one or two set of teams that exist. And that brings me to, so what is a good solution? Where can we head to? Of course, there are these challenges. And what are interesting ways to solve this particular problem? And what you are going to see in the next slide is an approach that could help solve this particular problem. And this really around, how do you use your data management platform? What's the kind of data management layer that you create, which really serves for analytics, which really serves for driving insight, which really serves for all the examples that you saw about improving customer service or better inventory management, etc. How do you create that kind of solution? And what you see here is, if you see on the left-hand side, you have got all kinds of data which exists. So relational data, which could be coming from OLTP or your ERP systems or CRM systems or lines of businesses. And then you have non-relational data, which is all the data which is getting generated online for you, variety of media files, social media, a lot of data coming from your connected devices. So all of that relational, non-relational data get into layers of data warehousing in relational and big data processing where they are non-relational. And then you get this data into these layers, and the expectation should be that these layers talk to each other. That between these layers you have got a kind of data virtualization which really allows you to go and query the data across both of these estates, and not just data warehousing separately and big data process separately and then try to visualize after that. So that's the other piece to keep in mind, is that how do we bring the ability to work through data across these two areas and not just one each. And then once you are able to query the data and do some analytics, then there should be an ability to use any kind of BI tool, any kind of dashboarding, cubes, etc., to be able to visualize that data. Then there should be any kind of advanced analytics tools that you should be able to use on this data, like machine learning. Can you do machine learning directly onto the data? Will you be able to bring intelligence in the data layer, etc.? And you start thinking about how can you bring all those advanced analytics. And we're not even going into cognitive and AI at this stage, which is another big opportunity, when once you have thought about how do you use data, how do you then bring those natural conversations to your consumers? How do you empower your organization to make sure that there is a way to talk to consumers in ways in which it has never been done before? And there is a lot of work which is happening in advanced intelligence which can be then brought onto the data. And then finally, you have any language, which is really around how do you make sure that whoever is the person who is working in your organization, whatever skill that they bring, whether they bring skill related to R or related to Python, how do they use those skills to really get insights from the data? So they don't need to relearn, but rather they can use their existing skills to go and start creating value immediately on whatever is the data estate that you have, so that they don't get constrained because of one language or the other. And finally, the layer which you see at the bottom is about, while I want to do all of this as a customer with my data, much of my data could be on premises or could be in the cloud. How do I have a consistent experience which allows me to start thinking about data across all of this? How do I really use data which is on the premises, take it to the cloud, or marry these two kinds of data to bring insights? So that's where we feel that overall the solution may look like, where you have got relational, non-relational coming through into data warehousing, big data, to really solve all those problems of data management that we talked about. And then you are able to do advanced analytics and any kind of language which allows you to serve to any kind of audience that you may have. And then you have on-premises and cloud to drive that consistent experience. With this, I'll hand over to Oliver, who's my colleague, and he'll talk to you about what Microsoft does here and why Microsoft is the right partner for you.
Thank you very much, Prem. And so I'm excited to be here to talk about why Microsoft for the data management platform for analytics. And so this is a very interesting historical slide about what Microsoft has already done. And this is something that hasn't really been told much to the external world, that Microsoft has actually been running some of the largest big data implementations in the world today, and we still do. So inside Microsoft, we have a data lake that is exabytes large. So one of the largest implementations of a big data in the world today, and we have 10,000 developers who are creating experimentation and just getting brand new insights that was not achievable prior. And so we've really shown that we are a leader to put the most data in a central place, and for us to really change the entire culture of Microsoft, whether it be in the Windows department or the Office department or the Cloud and Enterprise department, we're all transforming our businesses, by transforming our culture into something of experimentation, be able to gain and glean new insights instead of just the traditional operation reporting. And we're also doing some of the bleeding edge technologies around machine learning and deep learning and neural networks inside of Microsoft. And what we're doing for our customers is making this now available to you as part of our Azure data services. And so some of the things that we'll be talking about in the future slide is technologies that have been engineered and built from some Microsoft's heritage and history of doing these over the last decade. But before I go like 100% into Microsoft's solution, I do want to give you guys a roadmap, so to speak, to understand where you are and understand where you can go. And so this is a good framework that we originally kind of read and discovered from Gartner, who's been evangelizing this concept of the data management solution for analytics. And in it, they have 4 different use cases for the DMSA, or the data management solution for analytics. And so what they see is there is a traditional use case, there is a operational use case, there is a logical use case, and what they call context independent, and we're calling freeform in this specific slide. And these are 4 use cases that you can envision your data management solution being able to provide for your organization. And so let me just walk you through each stage. The traditional stage is something that should be very familiar to most of you, and it's really around the traditional data warehouse. And with the traditional data warehouse, you are essentially querying historical relational data. It can be large data, right? But it is historical and it's relational. And that's kind of the key characteristics of a traditional data warehouse. And what we're seeing is a lot of organizations evolving and maturing this investments to include more capabilities. Things like operational. And so what is our operational DMSA? It is the ability to not just query historical and relational data, but be able to gain real-time insights without impacting performance. And that's kind of a big qualifier, without impacting performance. A lot of organizations, the way they can accomplish this is by streaming real-time data from your operational sources into your analytical data store. Another way of accomplishing this is actually to have the exact same database essentially powering both your operational store and your analytics store on the same data, so that you don't have to move the data backwards and forwards. It's essentially the same data powered by an in-memory operational real-time analytics. That's kind of the next stage above traditional. With logical, we're now adding a layer of big data on top of the traditional relational store. So now you're able to ask questions of all types of data. It's data that's not only relational, but it's non-relational. And it's data that has different characteristics. Like it could be very, very large data in the petabytes or hundreds of petabytes, or maybe even potentially, beyond that. And so it is all types of data and all types of locations. And finally, the last stage that we've seen is the ability to unlock what we're calling, advanced data science, but it's really advanced analytics. It's deep learning. It's all of these different types of analytics that are starting to pop up, even AI, and being able to do that on that same set of data, and that's what we're calling freeform. And so these are the 4 stages of a data management solution for analytics. And so the question that we have for you, and that you as either an implementer or technical decision maker or even a business decision maker in your organization, and the question for you is, where are you? Which stage are you on? And essentially, you're probably in one of these, right? Like one of these you're experiencing right now within your organization. And so the question is, where do you kind of lie in this end-to-end spectrum? And also, as you figure out where you are as an organization, the other question that this slide kind of asks you is, where can you go to? And where is the vision? Where can you go next? What can you do to your underlying data management solution to evolve it to do more for you, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're here for. And that's what Microsoft is here for, is to partner with you so that you can do more with your data. You can have your data be faster and more intelligent and have it work for you. And that's really the goal of Microsoft. And what we have is an end-to-end solution. Microsoft's data management solution for analytics. We are here, and we essentially have three core pillars that I wanted to talk to you about. The first one is industry-leading scale and performance. The second one is built for intelligence. And the third one is open and flexible. And these are the three core tenets of our data warehouse and big data solutions to power your analytics. Let me talk about the first one. Industry-leading scale and performance. For us, it's really about ensuring that our solution can scale to any of your demands, whether it be in the terabytes range, the tens of terabytes range, the hundreds of terabytes range, the petabyte range, and beyond. We want to be able to make sure that we can meet all of your demands, not only now, but in the future. But it's not all about scale. It's also about performance, and we totally get this, that customers these days are moving from batch overnight reporting to wanting to do real-time analytics, wanting to get interactive insights on this large data set. And so what we have is the world record broken by Microsoft for TPCH, which is industry benchmark for data warehousing. And so we own the number one, and in many cases, the number 2 and number 3 slots for data warehousing for TPCH. And so I know that for some of you guys as external organizations outside, that actually might be a shocking thing to hear that, but we do. We own the industry standard benchmark for high performance for these types of workloads. The second pillar I want to talk to you about is built for intelligence. And this is really kind of the things that we've been alluding to throughout this presentation, is how can you build inside your data management solution the ability to have intelligence at the data layer, being able to do advanced analytics, the ability to do machine learning, the ability to do forecasting, the ability to do cognitive services and APIs, to do voice and facial recognition, and some of those advanced technologies that are out there in the marketplace. And we have those technologies available for you in our cloud, and it's built for intelligence. And the last point is also something that could actually even be surprising. Again, for those who haven't looked at Microsoft for quite some time, we are making a bold statement here that we are all about being open and flexible. And so this is a core tenet not only of Microsoft's data management solution, but also of Microsoft as a whole, as a company. We are moving towards being more open and flexible. What does that mean? Your choice of environment, your choice of language, your choice of platform. And so we're not just deploying our solution on Windows solely and exclusively. We're making our platform available on Linux. We're making our platform available on premises. We're making our platform available in the cloud. We are making our platform available for not just .NET and Visual Studio, but for other types of languages like Scala or Java or R or Python. And so really any type of language that you interact with, this is something that we're making available as part of our solution. And so what do we have? This is a slide that Prem showed you in terms of what is actually needed to meet those new trends that he talked about, the new challenges that a lot of us are facing as a decision maker within our organization or our IT professional. And so what does Microsoft offer as part of that solution? So let me just walk through a few of these one by one. In this middle layer is our data management solution for analytics. And as you can see, it can feed in all types of data, whether it be relational data from your traditional OLTP sources, your ERPs, your CRMs, your line of business applications. It can feed in your non-relational data from the web, from media, from social media, from your devices and IoT type scenarios. And it's feeding all in through a data virtualization layer that we're calling Polybase. What does a data virtualization layer allow you to do? It allows you to keep your data where it is, And you don't have to necessarily move that data because we will now put a layer on top of the data so that you can query relational and non-relational data in the same query, and the end user will have no idea that that's happening. And so we are abstracting the complexities of the shape of the data, where the data, the location of the data from the end user, and just being able to do all types of analytics on top of that. And so what do we have in terms of data warehousing? We have a plethora of solutions both on-premises and in the cloud, right? And on-premises, we have SQL Server and all those kind of benchmarks I talked about. That's all being powered by the SQL Server engine, right? And so, again, if that's not something that you've looked at very recently, you should definitely look at a SQL Server solution. We've done so much innovation over the last 2 to 3 years about making SQL Server blazing fast and being able to get the world record in terms of the data warehouse benchmarks. And so that's what we have on premises. And in the cloud, we can take that same SQL Server and put it as a IaaS virtual machine, or we can even have other vendors as virtual machines in the cloud as well for data warehousing. But what really is our hero offering is Azure SQL Data Warehouse. And this is a fully managed PaaS solution that is massively parallel processing, MPP, that allows you to scale out to literally any size of data that you need relational, right? To the petabyte size is what you're able to do. And this service uniquely is separating compute and storage so that you could scale those independently of one another. And furthermore, you could even pause your compute. Again, another differentiator of Microsoft's solution and really showing you the true elasticity that we have for relational data warehousing. And so this is definitely some of the kind of the industry leading solutions that we have for data warehousing. What about on the big data side? So as you look to big data, we have kind of 2 to 3 intrinsic solutions to think about. The first one is Azure HDInsight. And what is this? This is Microsoft's managed Hadoop and Spark offering in the cloud. And so I say managed because this is a very big important point. A lot of the cloud offerings out there in other clouds, they might not provide a fully managed solution where it is highly available with a 99.9% service level agreement. Anytime that any of our big data services were to ever go down, Microsoft will be made aware of this and our engineers will be called in at any time of the day, 24/7, to go fix your cluster and make sure you're up and running. This is a guarantee, by the way. This is something that Microsoft is putting our name behind, and it is not available anywhere else in terms of having such a high service level agreement of 99.9%. It's not available in any other cloud in terms of big data. And so this is just something to be aware of. But it allows you to do industry standard Hadoop and Spark. We're using the Hortonworks data platform. So this is industry standard Hadoop and Spark, and be able to query and store and process any type of data from a volume perspective, from a variety perspective, from a real-time kind of velocity perspective, and make that available for you to do any type of processing using the open source kind of Hadoop and Spark ecosystem. The other thing that we also have is Azure Data Lake, and this is a uniquely managed PaaS solution for big data that's available on the Microsoft Cloud that's not available anywhere else. And Azure Data Lake is really that offering that uses all of Microsoft's learning over the last decade in terms of making big data more productive for your end users, for your developers who are building big data jobs and massively parallel programs and scaling out that data to any extreme. That's what Data Lake's built for. And so it has that ability to use something like Visual Studio, and all you're doing is coding something once, and you're not having to worry about the underlying infrastructure. You're not having to worry about clusters and virtual machines and patching and upgrades and monitoring and any of that stuff. All you do is write your code as if you're writing for a single machine. You submit your job and you drag and drop a slider, and that slider will automatically provision n number of resources on the Azure cloud, and it'll immediately scale out within seconds. So you don't have to do any work prior. Within seconds, it will scale your job out to any number of resources. And once your job completes, it will automatically wind down the resources so that it's completely gone and you're no longer paying for it. And so this is a unique value proposition that we have in the marketplace. And you'll see a little bit more about this in the demo to come. But this is just a really exciting way to get the kind of the value of big data without having to go through all the normal hurdles that come with big data either on premises or in the cloud. So let's talk about why some of the organizations that have used Microsoft and what did they get? What are the benefits that they got out of it? And so let's just talk about this at a high level, and I will go through some customer examples with you. So the things that we've seen from our customers is the ability to integrate both relational and non-relational data. And that was a really big important point, because one of the things that customers saw and told Microsoft is we don't want to just do a rip and replace from our relational data warehouse to put it into Hadoop. We want to evolve our relational stores to include Hadoop. And that's a big differentiation in what I just said. It's not a rip and replace. It is an evolution so that we're getting the best of both worlds. And that's really where Microsoft shines, because we are an organization that totally gets both worlds. We get the old world with the traditional systems because we have SQL Server and we've been developing this for over a decade. And we also get the big data world, as I kind of mentioned prior. And so we are in a unique place to really understand that, and customers really appreciate that. We are able to scale at a scale that is just unseen in any other cloud. Let me give you a very specific example. Azure Data Lake Store will allow you to put a single file that is 1 petabyte large. And so what I just said is an astounding point. 1 petabyte large single file. That is just not seen, not even possible in any other cloud, and that's available in the Azure cloud today. And so it is something that our customers are seeing massive differentiation because they're able to do that. We have record-breaking performance. And so I mentioned this a few times already, but I do want to just emphasize, because this is just a shocking point for a lot of organizations out there, that we own the world record for data warehouse performance today. We own number one, and in many cases, but not only number one, number two, and number three, the top 3 slots for the highest performing data warehouse technology is in Microsoft, is offered by Microsoft, right? We have the enterprise service level agreement, 99.9% uptime. That's for both big data and data warehousing. And we have end-to-end security, single sign-on with Azure Active Directory. And I do want to emphasize this Azure Active Directory integration lets you have the same identities both on premises or in the cloud. And so all the investments that you made with Active Directory on premises will just be able to transition to the cloud seamlessly. And that's available not only on premises and in the cloud, it's available for relational and non-relational, so across all of our investments. And this is a big differentiator that our customers are really seeing a lot of value in. And so we do have quite a bit of customers who have already experienced this. Virginia Tech is an organization, a university here in the United States. We have NHS, which is a healthcare organization, a very large one in the UK. We have Rockwell Automation, which is a manufacturing organization here in the United States, and Carnegie Mellon, another university. And so we're seeing these organizations really adopt big data and or data warehousing at the largest scales. Let me just give you one small example around Virginia Tech before we go into a specific example around Jet.com. So Virginia Tech is a university who's doing research, genomic research, to try to find the cure for cancer. And so instead of getting massive research grants and securing tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to build out their own massive supercomputer data farm inside Virginia Tech, they realized that they could get all of what they were trying to achieve with something in the cloud. And so they're using Microsoft's Azure cloud to do this. And the ability to spin up compute and storage independent of one another was a big deal for them, because they can now pause their compute and not pay for things when they're not using it. When they needed to scale out their compute to process petabytes of genomic data, they were able to scale that to really any kind of altitude that they wanted to do. And so that was a great example. But what we wanted to do now is really transition to Jet.com and show you a video of how Jet.com is transforming their business with our big data investments.
I think it's a great time to be an entrepreneur. I love the idea of starting something from nothing.
At Jet.com, I saw an opportunity to transform e-commerce by focusing and innovating around price to, in real time, reprice products according to what's in people's baskets.
In order to do that, our pricing engine needs to continually evaluate tens of millions of products across thousands of merchants. There's continually tens of billions of operations going on to provide the lowest prices online. We're not in the business of creating new databases, new queuing methodologies, new storage mechanisms. Being able to leverage all the services and tools that are on the Azure platform, and we've gone from zero to a fully fledged e-commerce marketplace in about 12 months.
We already have 400,000 people signed up, and at launch there's the potential for millions of people to hit the website to get to billions of dollars in top line revenue. To be able to handle that level of scale would not be possible if it weren't for the cloud. We can sleep at night knowing that we're using Microsoft Azure cloud services.
Okay, so hopefully you guys saw quite a bit of what Jet.com was able to accomplish. All I really want to say is, wow, what a great transformation. And that's really what we're in the business of doing. We're wanting to partner with you guys as organizations to transform your business, but not just your business, your industry. That's really what Jet.com was wanting to do, is transform the e-commerce industry. And the underpinnings of all of this is Microsoft's big data and data warehousing solutions, or the data management solution for analytics. And with that, I do want to transition to Nishant so that he can show you the products in action. He can show you a great demo. So with that, over to you, Nishant.
Thanks, Oliver. It's a pleasure to be here, and I know we've saved the best for the last, as always, with the demo part of it. Now, what I'm going to show you over here is a financial services scenario where we brought together the data management platform for analytics from Microsoft. In other words, bringing together data warehousing and big data to derive a lot of business value. So what are we looking at over here? We're looking at a UWP app. Why do I have you on the sign-in screen? Well, to draw your attention to the sign-in using Azure Active Directory. Now, we've talked a bunch about the security and all the reliability pieces. To see it in action is another thing altogether. Here, we have Azure Active Directory integrated for all of your logins. So, any user logging into this particular application is actually mapped back to their identity, and we can track as to what kind of data they have access to, what kind of assets or queries are they able to run, etc. as well. In this case, we're looking at financial services, so we have a financial analyst and a financial manager. Let's log in using Jeff's login over here, and Jeff is a financial analyst. Now, as I sign in, the first screen that I see over here is a dashboard that Jeff would use for a lot of information to consume. Now, we're looking at stock quotes, we're looking at news feeds, we're looking at production values, we're looking at some notes, we're looking at indices, and all of that is coming in for us to observe all live. Now, imagine the solution and the back end for this as well. All of this data, which is, mind you, in the multiple terabytes, in fact, in the tens of terabytes as we speak, is getting landed inside of the Data Lake Store. Now, the Data Lake Store, of course, we understand, is the hyperscale store for analytics workloads. As soon as we have the data inside of the Data Lake Store, now we can perform analytics on top of this. In this case, we're using massive USQL jobs to go ahead and process all of this terabytes of data and bring out or derive information from it. For example, the sector summary. What does the sector summary show me over here? It's actually showing me how the individual sectors have done over a period of time. Again, the client list and how they've performed. The production revenue from the clients. So Jeff Phillips, as a financial advisor, has multiple portfolios that he manages. What is the overall portfolio value? To be able to crunch and aggregate all of that data in real time with changing market dynamics as well as changing values of stock prices, etc. And to be able to capture that and be able to audit and govern that is quite an achievement from a data management platform. Now, what's also interesting is the historical analysis. Look at this percentage of client revenue, where we are capturing as how over the years the investments of the individual portfolios have changed in the industries that they are venturing into. So for example, in 2013, there was a lot of emphasis on healthcare and potentially a little bit on the industrial side. Whereas in 2015, the majority of the investment went into energy and a lot in the financial services and industrial side. Now, this kind of analysis requires you to crunch hundreds of terabytes of data so that you can make decisions as to which direction you want your organization to invest further into. For Woodrow Financial Services, this kind of information is kind of very, very important because they need to bring this information to go predict how they want to divest certain portfolios in what sectors, in what securities, in what areas, and in what industries. Now let's just go ahead and dive into one of these customers over here. Ben Andrews happens to have a very healthy portfolio. Now, in addition to just having the portfolio information, what Woodgrove is also able to do is use historical information and pass this through advanced analytics models to give them a customer lifetime score, a customer churn score, and a risk score. Now that's interesting. We're bringing machine learning to work on top of the data that you already possess inside of your big data and the data warehouses. Now mind you, all of this data is being curated and aggregated inside of the big data processing engines, be it HDInsight and Spark for interactive analysis, or be it running R and scale-out models on top of Spark, or be it batch mode analysis with USQL to give you an aggregation and crunch all of that data for you to observe over a period of time. Now, once that data is curated and processed, this data is actually entering an Azure SQL data warehouse, and that is where this whole dashboard is getting pulled out of. So imagine raw, unstructured data landing in its absolute native form for you to do a lot of analysis around, and then you're able to curate, process, and derive value from it. And once you have that information, you can put this information in a publishing layer like your data warehouse for your reports, your dashboards, your analysts, and your end users to start consuming from. Now, this is just the financial advisor. Let me go ahead and sign out and potentially go ahead and sign in as Rob. Rob is the financial manager. So he's looking after the overall business, the health of Woodgrove Financial Services. Now, what's important to Rob over here is the compliance and the geographical exposure of the data as well. As these stock prices come in, you're now able to go ahead and observe how your geographical exposure is changing. What is your compliance status at this point in time? What is the overall portfolio's estimate versus performance? And how is your organization performing as with respect to whatever you've promised? As well as go ahead and observe the individual portfolios managed by the advisors to give you a scorecard on those individual advisors as well. Now, again, what's important is there are some machine learning models that are giving you information around any kind of compliance breaches that may be happening over here. In this case, look at the alerts. The first alert over here is actually showing me that there is potential of a suspicious trading activity happening over here. How are we able to observe this? Well, with all the historical data that we possess, and now with new information that's coming in, we are able to go ahead and drive the information around what are the anomalies in some of these new data that's coming through, and how does this align to the normal curve that we've been observing. If there is some deviation, there is potential for anomaly or potential for fraud. And that's how it gets flagged. Now, of course, financial services being a very closely managed domain, you cannot just go make machine-related decisions. So you flag it off to a compliance team for them to look further into. Now, what would a compliance team actually go ahead and look into? Let's go ahead and pull up one such dashboard that the compliance team would be interested in. Let me go ahead and sign in over here and pull up the suspicious trade dashboard for us to look into. Now, as we look at this dashboard, you can already see that the R model that was working on top of Spark clusters to process terabytes of data is now able to detect individual anomalies for individual trades on individual securities by individual portfolio owners. So in this case, it's Michael Allen who's trading on a security with the abbreviation CLVS and is showing an anomaly in terms of the trading patterns over here. So suddenly, whereas his trends are in the 5K trading range, he's showing some trades in the 30K trading range. And right after those trades, the security's price has increased drastically, which kind of shows potentially a pattern of somewhat kind of insider trading, etc. as well. And that's what we wanted to go ahead and investigate further. Now you can go ahead and flag this off to the trade department as well as go ahead and flag it off to the compliance team to look into further. Now another important aspect that I wanted to show you over here is the Visual Studio tooling for the Azure Data Lake Analytics jobs that we're executing. In this case, there is a job that's processing about 12 terabytes of data, and it takes about 8.5 hours. We go ahead and assign it a random parallelism of 20. We could go ahead and assign it a 20,000 parallelism if we wanted to. And here is the job execution graph as it went through. For developers, the interesting piece is you can actually play back this job graph to see if there were any bottlenecks during the execution of this entire job, and if they need to go ahead and optimize this any further. There is, of course, diagnostics available. There is progress and execution time heat maps available on individual jobs that went through over here as well. Now, we've seen a lot of information, and I'm sure you were able to grasp a lot of this over the last hour or so. I'm just going to go ahead and finish off with a slide over here which shows you what we have as the architecture for this demo that we just observed, and then a few closing remarks as we get in. So first, the architecture. The Intelligent Banker demo is actually the amalgamation of the modern data warehouse or the data management solution for analytics. You see, we ingest data using tools like PowerShell, Data Factory, or even Stream Analytics for streaming data. We land all of this data inside of the Azure Data Lake Store and then use services like HDInsights and Data Lake Analytics to go ahead and do some big data, massive processing on massive volumes with structured, unstructured, or semi-structured data. Once this data is curated, now we can use tools like Polybase to go ahead and feed this cleaned up data or aggregated data into the SQL data warehouse where the users can now connect to. Now, if analysts actually need to connect to some raw data, they can use tools within HDInsights for Spark or Hive to actually go ahead and connect there directly as well. I hope this gives you a better view of what Microsoft offers as part of its data management platform for analytics, which essentially is the big data and data warehousing platform that you should be building upon.